Welcome to part two of Robert Zarlingo's story. The 1930s were hard for most people, but if you did have a little bit of money, there were great bargains to be had. Here, Robert Zarlingo talks about how some people were able to profit during those times.
When the 30s came along, if you had a few bucks, hell, you could pick up some of those smaller places that had went for tax sale.
Right.
And that's the way Clow and Jolly and Helandris and them and Jensen's built up those big herds and big chunks of land.
Bought up during the Depression.
For dime an acre, quarter an acre was a hell of a price.
Wow.
And a lot of it just paid 3 years taxes. Well, like Jensen's over there over on Highway 13 went to Craig over what the heck's the mountain there, Mount Streeter, and up where the Mount Streeter mining was on that country. Heck, some of them homesteaders that just went off. They had cattle, homesteaded 160, some of them 320. And hell, cattle, you couldn't make a nickel to save your soul.
Huh.
And heck, old Jensen, him and Bill was the first one that came in. And his brother came too after. But, I don't know, Bill he probably had 1,000 head of sheep, ewes. He'd come in and he just, on that 9-mile country, he just let him, turn them loose. Of course, had a herder, but hell, one of them, he set up an account at the bank in Meeker, and he just let them sheep, hell, there was no fences enough. If there was some fence, there was just barbed wire fence. Well, hell, them sheep would just go through and feed them out. Well, if one of them homesteaders had come to him, about feeding off their place, well, he said, "How much you want for the goddamn place?" And he'd, on the back of an envelope or something, he'd write him out a check, for hell knows, maybe $50, $100 would have been a big check, especially if it was, it probably a 320, $100 was somewhere's around a quarter an acre, but, and then some of them other ones, I know some that, there was some of that was 10 cents an acre. Jolly up on Hubbard Mesa, north and west of Rifle, paid the taxes, 3 years taxes. Well, on 160 acres, the tax was probably $5, $6 a year.
The 20s and 30s were hard enough, but Prohibition made it even harder. Prohibition was enacted in Colorado in 1916, 4 years before the national prohibition took effect. And one of the main targets of this legislation were Colorado's Italian immigrants. Backers of the legislation saw it as another way to force the Italians to give up their customs and adopt the ways of the dominant culture. Families were allowed to make limited amounts of wine, but not whiskey. But many families defied the law and made whiskey for themselves and others who felt the law was irrational and misguided. Here Robert Zarlingo talks about the day the sheriff and the revenuer paid his family a visit.
When Prohibition came in, they mined coal in the daytime and bootlegged at night. I guess I would.
When would you sleep? I mean,
boy, I tell you, them guys, I guess some of the stories you heard was unbelievable,
When they were bootlegging, were they making it out in the woods like
the
old days?
Yeah. Oh, heck, you take that Grass Valley Canal that brings water to Harvey Gap from Rifle Creek up in some of them draws, because, see, they could set a still down and, build it just kind of like a cellar, and then they could run that cooler water from the ditch to cool the car. Oh, it ain't been, probably 30, 40 years ago when I was on the ditch board and used to go up, we'd check on that ditch and stuff. They was still evidence of them little places. Yeah, and they told a story one time when Uncle Sam was bootlegging at the ranch up at Harvey Gap, and the ditch that went to the reservoir went right in front of the house where Grandpa and Grandma was at, and he was making some booze, and Grandma and Grandpa and I think it was Aunt Annie was at the house, and they seen. They knew it was revenuer and probably the sheriff and a revenuer, because they're quite a ways over there to the main road, and they had to open the gate and come in, and so hell, the dang still was right out there, just 100 yards from the house, and they just lucky. I guess they seen them at of course, a vehicle showing up, on the main road.
Right. You can see
anyway, they Grandpa he grabbed his irrigating shovel and put it on his shoulder, and he headed off across the ranch, like going pretty good lick. And so the sheriff and the revenuers, they followed him, and of course he cut across, and they had to go kind of around the ditch, made a big loop, and it caught up with him over there. Finally, he was digging around, pretending like he was doing something. "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I irrigate." Well, he said, I don't know what they said, something about, they heard or something that there was bootlegging going on. He said, nothing about no bootlegging. He said, "I'm a farmer, rancher, Anyway, while they was over there, Annie and Grandma took and dumped the still in the ditch. And that's all there was to it.
That's the end of part 2 of Robert Zarlingo's story of the 1930s. To hear other stories of the 20s and 30s, check out our other storytellers.